Christ Lutheran Church began as a mission congregation in South Austin after approval by the Texas District Mission Board. Early in 1946, several Missouri Synod churches in Austin, working with the Texas District Mission Board, conducted a survey to determine the feasibility of forming a Missouri Synod church in South Austin. The results of the survey indicated a resounding yes. This church was to be the first LCMS church in South Austin and came in time to meet a demand brought by the post-World War II expansion. Reverend Donald V. Haffeman of Dumas was called by the mission board to start work in the new field. On March 1st, 1946, the Reverend Donald V. Haffeman arrived in Austin, serving as a missionary to South Austin, since there was no church nor any organized members. So he set about making contacts and looking for property to rent. Nothing suitable to rent could be found until Mr. A.C. Knippa of Austin, who was interested in getting the mission started in South Austin, purchased the house at 212 East Monroe, directly across the street from property purchased by the mission board, and offered to rent it to the new mission for nominal rent. The first worship service was held May 5th, 1946, with 69 persons in attendance. Pastor Haffeman selected Joshua 1, verses 6 through 9 for the text, a portion of which reads as follows: Have I not commanded thee? Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed. For the Lord thy God is with thee, whithersoever thou goest. Mr. Knippa had also given Pastor Haffeman $250 for incidental expenses. Not wanting to put this money in a personal account, Pastor Haffeman wanted to bank it in the name of the new church. But at the time, there was no name for this new church. Mr. Knippa suggested the name Christ Church. The name stuck. The mission board later purchased the property at 212 Monroe Street from Mr. Knippa at his original cost. The Sunday school was formed and organized on May 25th, 1946, with an enrollment of 35 children. For at least 2 years, the house was also used in support of a deaf ministry, which was served by Reverend Theodore Delaney. The first voters' meeting was held on November 6th, 1946, with 10 men present, along with the Reverend A.O. Rast, Associate Mission Director. During this meeting, a Constitution Committee was appointed. The Constitution was ready for presentation at a meeting held on November 24th. The Church Constitution was adopted on December 4th, 1946, and was signed by the members on April 15, 1947, just 6 weeks after installing Pastor Haffeman as the first called pastor of Christ Lutheran Church. On September 9th of 1947, the Mission Board approved the plans for the new church building, and the Church Extension Board approved a loan of $20,000. Groundbreaking took place on December 7th, 1947. The new sanctuary was dedicated on May 23rd, 1948, built and equipped at a cost of $21,313. One of the members, Mr. Emil Schrader, made the altar, pulpit, lectern, pews, communion railing, baptismal font, hymnal board, and 4 collection plates for $2,824. On September 13th, Christ Lutheran Church began to operate a kindergarten, starting with a teacher, Miss Irene Wukash, and 24 students. The kindergarten was discontinued several years later. In 1948 was also the year when Christ Lutheran Church was officially accepted as a member of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. In 1949, Pastor Haffeman accepted a call to Plainview, Texas, leaving on June 15th. The Reverend A.O. Rast served as interim pastor while fulfilling his responsibilities with the mission board. On September 1st of that same year, Reverend Arthur O. Call was installed as the congregation's second pastor. His ministry focused on evangelism and community outreach. But 18 months later, in 1951, Pastor Call accepted a call to become missionary evangelist in the Southern Illinois district. 1951 was also a year when Christ Lutheran Church participated in two synodical fundraisers, raising $1,500 for the Conquest for Christ drive and then $1,300 for the Building for Christ drive. The Reverend Lewis W. Wickham was installed as the third pastor of Christ Lutheran Church on September 23, 1951. In October of 1954, Christ Lutheran Church began a branch Sunday school in the Meadowbrook Housing Project. On January 1, 1955, the congregation became self-sustaining, which means it was no longer dependent upon the mission board for financial assistance. In November, it purchased a house on Drake Street across from the sanctuary to use as a parsonage, which increased its debt by over $7,500. The parsonage was improved with siding and paint. In 1956, the congregation began planning for the building of a school. Its goal to begin was set for September 1957. Pastor Wickham then accepted a call to the Rio Grande Valley in 1959. On May 22, 1960, Reverend Theodore R. Greasy was installed as the congregation's fourth pastor. In a special voters meeting in November of 1961, the members of the congregation voted to participate in sponsoring a new mission church further south. This was based on the results of a survey conducted in southwest Austin in July of that year. In March of 1962, a house at 1908 Travis Heights was purchased as the parsonage. By May, the first organizational meeting of the new mission church, Bethany Lutheran Church, was held. Bethany's first service was held on June 1st of 1962. Services were initially conducted in a school. The next month, 67 of the members of Christ Lutheran Church were granted transfers to Bethany. June 1962 through July 1965, Pastor Greasy served both Christ and Bethany Lutheran churches. In the spring of 1963, the parsonage, church, and parish hall were air-conditioned. In 1964, the parish hall, in which Christ Lutheran Church had first held worship services, was renovated and extended, and an office of the pastor was completed in the parish hall. In 1965, the property north of the sanctuary was purchased, the house on it raised, and the property landscaped. On November 15, 1966, Pastor Greasy departed as he accepted a call to St. Mark Lutheran Church in Waco, Texas. The Reverend Roy K. Bohr received his first call upon graduation from Concordia Theological Seminary in Springfield, Illinois, to serve as the fifth pastor of Christ Lutheran Church, and was installed on August 13th of 1967. In October of that year, a choir was started by Mrs. Lorna Beck. In November, the narthex and a mother's room were added to the church. That same year, the church began a fellowship group called the Koinonia Fellowship Club. In 1968, worship was expanded to 2 services. In January of 1969, the church was carpeted. And in October, the voters resolved to start planning for a new parish hall education building. In 1970, a regular part-time secretary was hired. In time, this position became a full-time position. Elsie Koenig, who was the person initially hired to work part-time, stayed in this position until she retired from Christ Lutheran Church on February 28th of 1995. In the voters' meeting held in March of 1970, the church constitution was revised to include women as voting members. At its 25th celebration in 1971, a building fund was launched with the new theme, Christ is Alive, We're 25. April 16, 1972, was the groundbreaking for the new Fellowship Hall and Education Building, which was dedicated on March 25, 1973. This building was an addition built to the west of the sanctuary and provided an overflow area for the sanctuary. The Reverend William Knippa was the first pastor to serve as an assistant pastor at Christ Lutheran Church and served from 1973 to 1974. 1976 was the year the sanctuary was extensively remodeled, with a new altar, pulpit, baptismal font, stained glass windows, new carpeting, and refinished pews at a cost of $30,000. On August 14, 1977, a pipe organ was dedicated. Its final 3 ranks were added in April of 1980. In 1978, Christ Lutheran Church had a director of Christian education intern, but in the following year began to participate in the vicarage program and did so until 1991. In 1979, it purchased 4 houses north of the property on which the sanctuary was located. One of these houses was used to house the vicar, while the other 3 houses were rented out. That same year, a fellowship group of seniors was begun known as the Under 100 Club. A young adult group began also in a subsequent year and later took on the name Mastics, married and singles together in Christ. In 1982, a Spanish language service was added on Sunday evenings, which was sponsored by San Juan Lutheran Church. In 1983, planning began for building a new sanctuary. Planning and fundraising continued into 1984, guided by the efforts of a professional fundraising company, Funds Unlimited. The campaign was called New Horizons, with Christ the cornerstone. In addition to a new sanctuary, this project included several new classrooms, a new kitchen, additional bathrooms and storage areas, and an enlarged fellowship area which would incorporate the old sanctuary and off-street parking. This was accomplished by adding to the 1948 sanctuary and the 1973 Fellowship and Education Building. The old kitchen in the Fellowship Hall was later used as part of the nursery. The architect for this building project was a member of the congregation, Tommy Craig. In September 1985 was the groundbreaking day for this new building. The cornerstone for this new portion of the building was laid on May 4th of 1986 as part of the congregation's 40th anniversary celebrations. Included in the cornerstone box were a Bible, a hymnal, photographs, newspaper articles, church bulletins, and New Horizons t-shirt, which included all the names of the members of the church. The new sanctuary was dedicated on August 4th of 1986. The guest speaker was Texas District President Glenn Oshoni. On July 2nd, 1989, Pastor Bohr resigned from the ministry. The former assistant pastor at Christ Lutheran, Reverend William Knippa, who was then a pastor at Bethany Lutheran Church, served as vacancy pastor and vicarage supervisor. On January 14th of 1990, the Reverend James R. Linderman was installed at Christ Lutheran Church as its 6th pastor. In 1992, Christ Lutheran Church started a joint Hispanic ministry with the Texas District. On October 3rd of 1993, the Reverend William Allen Silk was installed at Christ Lutheran Church as an associate pastor to develop the Hispanic ministry. In 1995, the Stephen Ministry Program was started at Christ Lutheran Church, training under the Stephen leader from Bethany Lutheran Church. This was the same year that several members of the congregation remodeled the nursery and another member of the congregation painted murals on the windows of the Sunday school rooms. On February 18th of 1996, Pastor Silk gave his farewell sermon as he had accepted a call to Nuestro Salvador, our Savior, Lutheran Church in Corpus Christi, Texas. On the occasion of Christ Lutheran Church's 50th anniversary in 1996, Dr. Gerald Kieschnick, Texas District President, gave the sermon. Later that same year, the congregation called a Director of Christian Education, Jill Moyer. She was installed in 1996, but resigned her position in late 1999. In April of 1998, Pastor Linderman retired from the ministry, retaining his position as a Texas District Vice President. During his tenure, Pastor Linderman had begun a prayer and praise service on Saturday nights, which eventually became a third worship service on Sunday morning. Alcoholics Anonymous and other dependency groups began to use Christ's Workshop during the week for weekly meetings. After an extended interim period, a call was extended to Reverend John C. Stenfeld in October of 1999 to serve as the seventh pastor of Christ Lutheran Church. Pastor Stenfeld accepted the call and was installed on January 16th of 2000. In 2001, the debt on the loan for the sanctuary built in 1986 was paid off. That same year, a Mother's Day Out program was started by Reverend Stenfeld's wife, Pachalyn, and after installing playground equipment to provide mothers in the neighborhood an inexpensive place to leave their children while they tended to their many daily tasks. In August of 2007, Christ called Jordan Bessling to serve as the Director of Family Life Ministry. After 2 years of assessing the needs of the congregation and the gifts of Jordan, a new position was created for his and the congregation's mutual benefit: the Minister of Creative Communications and Community Connections, affectionately known as MCC Squared. In 2008, the church began a new Sunday education program for children called Kingdom Quest, a multi-sensory program designed to be more like VBS on Sundays rather than the traditional Sunday school classroom experience. Various murals and paintings were added to the classrooms, along with a puppet stage to engage the children in new and exciting ways. Part of Jordan's new position at Christ was to encourage and facilitate congregational activity in servant events. A group of members traveled to Mexico in 2008, to Oklahoma in 2009, and New Orleans in 2011 to help with a variety of building, rehabilitation, and cleanup efforts. The congregation also became engaged in numerous servant activities in and around Austin: the food bank, Marbridge, Ramp Project, neighborhood revitalization, the Art Trail, Greenworks, Blue Santa, and Angel Tree, to name a few. Along with all of these servant activities, Christ Lutheran Church also had two groups that had been around for a long time, continuing to serve the community: the Quilters and the Braille Workers. All of these servant activities were in keeping with Christ's new mission and vision statement that had been drafted in 2009. The mission of Christ Lutheran Church is to connect people to Jesus through inspirational worship, loving service, caring fellowship, and relevant education, so that they may know and grow in His love. In 2010, the congregation developed a new website designed to be more user-friendly and more engaging, aimed at providing gospel content and church information for both those inside and outside the congregation. Included on this new site was a library of past sermons organized by date, series, and books of the Bible. In 2011, Christ began a summer visual arts camp to connect and serve the children of the community. And in 2015, Christ Lutheran began to reach out to its community and to raise money for various ministries through a seasonal pumpkin patch. This outreach continues still this day and is a centerpiece of Christ's connection with their community. Finally, in 2020, due to the global pandemic and local restrictions, Christ Lutheran began to live stream his worship services via Facebook Live. Though most of Christ's members would eventually return to in-person worship, the live stream broadcast of the worship continues to serve as an additional resource for Christ to carry out its mission of connecting people to Jesus so that they may both know his love and grow in his love. Much has changed in the 75 years of Christ Lutheran Church. But one thing has remained the same: its commitment to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with its community and with the world. One other thing has remained also. 3 of the original charter members are still present and active at Christ: Tommy Craig, Harold Derenberger, and Harold Hose. By God's grace, for as long as Christ Lutheran Church exists as a body of believers, it is their fervent prayer that they never stray from their calling to be and their commitment to be the people of Christ, sharing the love of Christ. To God be the glory.